Gaither's career is about to be over. Bill Gaither may be facing prosecution, which makes many wonder if this means the end of his reign. How did it happen that one of the most influential pastors in the Christian media became embroiled in controversy? And what does this mean for the future of his ministry? New exposed details of his alleged involvement are staggering, and the consequences could be serious. Join us, and we'll tell you the shocking truth about Bill Gaither's problems with the law and what it could mean for his ministry, his family, and the millions of people who have followed his journey. Trial by Bill Gaither. From the moment news broke about Bill Gaither's shocking legal troubles, social media erupted into chaos. Fans across the world reacted with complete disbelief, unable to imagine the iconic gospel legend caught up in such serious accusations. Gaither had always seemed untouchable, one of gospel music's most beloved and respected figures, admired by millions for his heartfelt lyrics, inspirational performances, and squeaky clean public image. How could someone who wrote songs that inspired faith and hope suddenly face accusations so serious that they threatened his entire ministry? When the news leaked that Bill Gaither might be involved in legal troubles, the reactions online were instant and intense. Fans expressed disbelief, confusion, and outright denial. At first, many refused to even consider that their idol might be involved in anything illegal. People argued fiercely, accusing gossipers of lying, jealousy, or misunderstanding the situation. But as more details emerged, confusion and shock grew stronger, and disbelief slowly turned into suspicion. The rumors began when a vague comment by Gaither's former bandmate, Mark Lowry, sparked speculation online. Lowry had publicly hinted at something scandalous about Gaither during a live event, shocking millions of viewers. Within hours, social media exploded with theories and debates, and soon after, anonymous online sources began sharing detailed claims that Gaither was under investigation for financial fraud, tax evasion, or misuse of charitable funds. Fans struggled to comprehend these rumors. They asked questions openly. Was Gaither secretly using donations from trusting supporters to fund a lavish personal lifestyle? Had he betrayed the trust of those who believed in him? Some reports mentioned possible investigations into Gaither's finances, specifically concerning suspicious transfers of money from his charity accounts into personal ones. Fans were stunned and heartbroken at the thought of someone like Gaither, who had spent his life preaching honesty, kindness, and generosity, being accused of dishonesty. Social media flooded with messages expressing shock, disappointment, and anger. People wrote long emotional posts questioning their lifelong trust in Gaither, wondering whether the inspirational lyrics they'd cherished now felt empty or hypocritical. Meanwhile, online forums buzzed with heated debates. Fans fiercely argued among themselves, with one side defending Gaither's integrity, insisting the accusations were false, malicious attempts by jealous rivals or media seeking drama. They demanded proof, refusing to believe their hero could be guilty of wrongdoing. Others were equally passionate in their doubts, wondering openly if Gaither had successfully hidden secrets for years. They recalled moments from past events that suddenly seemed suspicious, reinterpreting Gaither's actions in ways they'd never considered before. As the controversy exploded, Gaither's ministry faced enormous pressure to respond. Finally, a statement was released by Gaither's representatives, claiming everything was just a big misunderstanding, and that Mark Lowry's comments had been misinterpreted or exaggerated. But this only made things worse, as fans grew suspicious of why Gaither appeared uncomfortable and defensive if there was truly nothing to hide. Amid the growing confusion, Bill Gaither's daughter stepped forward to defend her father. Taking to social media, she wrote passionately, "My father devoted his entire life to helping others and spreading the gospel. These allegations are nothing but rumors intended to hurt our family. Please respect our privacy." But even her strong words couldn't stop the speculation. Fans dissected every sentence, looking for hidden meanings. They wanted clearer answers, not carefully crafted PR statements. People close to Gaither's family privately said that he was devastated by the controversy. Friends insisted that Gaither had always been transparent, that his generosity and integrity were genuine, and the accusations deeply hurt him. Yet despite their defense, Gaither himself remained mostly silent publicly, fueling even more speculation about his guilt or innocence. The confusion and debate tore through Gaither's loyal community, leaving fans unsure of what to think or how to feel. Many questioned everything they'd believed about their longtime idol. Social media was flooded with fans expressing sadness, disappointment, and confusion. For some, it felt like losing a trusted family member. For others, anger dominated, They felt deceived, betrayed, and lied to. No matter how the investigation ultimately concluded, the damage to Bill Gaither's reputation and ministry was undeniable. His legacy, built carefully over decades, suddenly felt fragile. Loyal fans who once trusted him without question now viewed him with suspicion and uncertainty. Even his most devoted supporters acknowledged that these shocking rumors had forever changed the way the world saw him. Gaither, the beloved gospel icon, had become a man tangled in controversy, and nothing would ever be quite the same again. Inside the courtroom, Bill Gaither's shocking verdict. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, fans, and longtime followers of Bill Gaither sat shoulder to shoulder, their eyes locked on the front of the room, waiting for the inevitable. The air was thick with tension, the kind that made it hard to breathe. Every creak of a chair, every hushed whisper, felt deafening in the silence that had settled over the space. The man who had once been celebrated as one of the most influential figures in gospel music now sat at the defense table, his shoulders slightly hunched, hands clasped together, eyes staring straight ahead, though it was unclear if he was actually looking at anything at all. Bill Gaither had always been a man who commanded attention, on stage, in interviews, even in casual conversations. But today, he looked small. The weight of what was happening seemed to press down on him, aging him in real time. His once bright and confident demeanor had been replaced by something hollow, something lost. He was still wearing the suit he had worn to every day of the trial, though today the fabric seemed to hang a little looser around his frame. His wife, Gloria, sat behind him in the first row of the gallery, her hands gripping the arms of the chair so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Next to her sat their children, their faces pale, their expressions unreadable. They hadn't spoken much since the trial began. Maybe they didn't know what to say anymore. The judge, a stern man with years of experience handling high-profile cases, finally entered the room, his robe billowing slightly as he took his seat. The chatter that had been bubbling quietly in the back of the room ceased instantly. A heavy silence fell as everyone braced themselves for the moment that would define everything. Bill Gaither didn't move, but his fingers clenched together a little tighter. "Mr. Gaither," the judge's voice rang through the courtroom, firm and unwavering. "This court has spent the last several months reviewing the evidence presented in your case, the testimonies given, and the impact of your actions. It is clear that your influence in the Christian community has been substantial, and your contributions to gospel music are undeniable. However, what we must address here today is not your legacy in music, but your actions as a leader, a figure of trust, and the consequences of those actions." The words were sharp, each one carrying the weight of finality. Bill Gaither's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He had known this was coming, yet nothing could prepare him for the reality of it. "The evidence shows that you knowingly diverted funds from your ministry's charitable donations into personal accounts," the judge continued. "Money given in good faith by supporters, meant for outreach, meant for helping those in need, was instead used for personal financial gain. The court finds that this constitutes fraud, a betrayal of trust, and a violation of multiple federal laws." A soft gasp rippled through the courtroom. Even though many had suspected this outcome, hearing it out loud, confirmed by the judge, made it real in a way that hit differently. Gloria Gaither closed her eyes, her lips pressing together as if holding back tears. One of their children shifted uncomfortably in their seat, their face turning a deep shade of red. Bill Gaither finally moved, his hands unclasping for the first time in over an hour. He ran one through his graying hair, exhaling slowly, like a man trying to steady himself against an invisible force. He didn't argue, didn't shake his head, didn't even flinch. He just listened, waiting for the moment when his fate would be sealed. The judge leaned forward slightly, his gaze never leaving Gaither. "It is the duty of this court to uphold justice, and in cases such as this, where trust has been abused on such a large scale, leniency is not an option. Therefore, in accordance with the law, I hereby sentence you, William J. Gaither, to 5 years in federal prison." The courtroom exploded. A mix of gasps, cries, and hushed whispers filled the space as the weight of the sentence sank in. Bill Gaither sat frozen, his hands now resting on his lap, his eyes blinking slowly as if he hadn't fully registered the words. His wife let out a quiet sob, her shoulders shaking as she pressed a hand to her mouth. His children looked at each other, searching for something, maybe reassurance, maybe understanding, but neither seemed to find it. Somewhere in the back of the room, a woman murmured, "This can't be real." Another voice, angrier, spat, "I knew it. I knew he was guilty." The judge, unfazed by the reaction, continued speaking. "You will be taken into custody immediately. Given the nature of your offenses, parole may be considered after serving a minimum of 3 years, depending on behavior and further legal review." Bill Gaither let out a shaky breath. 3 years. It felt like a lifetime. He had spent decades building a career, a reputation, a ministry that had touched millions. And now, it would take less than half that time for it all to be reduced to a cautionary tale. The bailiff stepped forward, waiting for the judge's final instructions. "Court is adjourned," the judge declared, banging his gavel. The sound echoed through the courtroom, a punctuation mark to a story that had reached its inevitable conclusion. As the noise around him grew, Bill Gaither turned slightly in his chair, looking over his shoulder at Gloria. Their eyes met, and for the first time since this nightmare began, he saw something in her expression that he hadn't seen before. Fear. Not just sadness, not just disappointment, but real, honest fear. He wanted to say something, to reassure her, to promise that they would get through this. But what could he possibly say? That everything would be okay? That he would find a way to fix this? That would be a lie, and they both knew it. The bailiff reached for his arm, guiding him to his feet. His legs felt stiff, unsteady, like he wasn't entirely sure how to move anymore. He glanced toward the audience, where his fans and longtime supporters sat in stunned silence. Some were crying. Some looked betrayed. Others refused to make eye contact at all. As he was led toward the exit, the reality of his situation hit him with full force. This wasn't just a bad dream. It wasn't a misunderstanding that could be cleared up with a statement or an apology. He was going to prison. And when he got out, if he got out, nothing would ever be the same. Before he disappeared through the courtroom doors, he turned his head slightly and muttered under his breath, just loud enough for those nearest to hear, "I never thought it would end like this." And then, just like that, Bill Gaither was gone. Fans and family react to Bill Gaither's imprisonment. The moment the courtroom doors closed behind Bill Gaither, the world seemed to split into two very different reactions, one of heartbreak and devastation, and the other of anger and disbelief. His family sat frozen in their seats, staring blankly at the empty space where he had just stood moments before. His wife Gloria looked like she was trying to hold herself together, but the weight of what had just happened was crushing. Their children sat stiffly beside her, glancing at each other, eyes filled with a mixture of sadness, confusion, and helplessness. There were no words. Nothing could prepare a family for a moment like this. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, desperate to capture the reactions of anyone who had attended the trial. Cameras flashed, microphones were shoved into faces, and urgent questions filled the air. Do you still support Bill Gaither? Did he betray his fans? What will happen to his ministry now? Gloria kept her head down, shielding herself from the chaos. Their children followed closely, staying silent as they pushed through the crowd, their father's fate still sinking in. Back at home, the Gaither family was met with an even heavier silence. The house felt empty, lifeless. For decades, Bill had been the center of it all, his laughter, his music, his presence filling every corner. Now, all that remained was the echo of his absence. Gloria sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped tightly around a cup of tea she hadn't taken a sip from. The phone rang constantly, calls from friends, family, and longtime supporters all wanting to check in, offer words of comfort, or simply ask the one question no one had an answer to: how did this happen? Meanwhile, the reaction from fans was explosive. Social media was flooded with thousands of posts, comments, and debates over what had just taken place. For many, the news felt impossible to believe. Bill Gaither, the man who had brought gospel music to millions, was now behind bars? It didn't make sense. Loyal fans flooded online forums with messages of disbelief, desperately searching for explanations. "There has to be more to this story," one fan wrote. "Bill would never do something like this. I don't believe it." Others, however, weren't as forgiving. A growing number of people began voicing their frustration, their anger, their disappointment. "I gave money to his ministry for years," one comment read, "and now I find out it was used for his personal gain? This is betrayal." Another user posted, "I feel like I've been lied to my whole life. I looked up to him, and now I don't know what to think anymore." Church leaders and fellow gospel artists scrambled to respond, unsure how to handle the situation. Some remained silent, too shocked or unwilling to comment. Others publicly distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with the scandal. But a few chose to defend Gaither, insisting that despite his mistakes, his impact on gospel music and faith couldn't be erased. Bill Gaither has touched more lives than we can count. One well-known Christian singer posted, "Yes, he made mistakes, but we can't forget all the good he's done." The divide among fans only deepened as time went on. Some organized prayer groups, urging people to forgive Gaither and pray for his redemption. "We all sin," one supporter wrote. "This isn't the end of Bill's story. God forgives, and so should we." Others refused to see the situation as anything but a complete disgrace. "This wasn't a small mistake," a former fan argued. "This was calculated. He knew what he was doing, and he took advantage of people's faith." The most intense backlash came from those who had personally donated to Gaither's ministry. Many felt personally betrayed, questioning whether the money they had given in good faith had truly gone to the causes they were promised. Some even discussed filing lawsuits to recover their donations, claiming they had been misled. A group of former supporters started a petition calling for a full audit of Gaither's ministry, demanding transparency about where every dollar had gone over the years. Back inside the prison, Gaither was experiencing a world completely different from anything he had ever known. Gone were the warm lights of a stage, the sound of a cheering audience, the respect he once carried. Now he was just another inmate, stripped of the privileges he had once taken for granted. He spent most of his time in silence, barely speaking to anyone. The reality of his sentence was still sinking in. Every morning he woke up in the same small cell, surrounded by unfamiliar faces, forced to follow a routine he had no control over. For years, Bill had been the one leading, directing his ministry, making decisions, shaping the future of gospel music. Now, all control had been taken from him. Meals were scheduled, time outside was limited, and everything he did was under supervision. The loneliness weighed heavily on him. He thought of his family constantly, wondering how they were coping, if they had forgiven him, if they were ashamed of him, if they were ashamed of him. He knew they were suffering just as much as he was, if not more. Letters began to arrive, stacks of them piling up in the prison mailroom. Some were from old friends, others from longtime fans who still believed in him. "We're praying for you," many of them said. Some letters were filled with anger, accusing him of betraying his faith, his fans, and his ministry. Others begged him to explain himself, to give them a reason to keep believing in the man they had once admired. But no letter was harder to read than the ones from his family. Gloria wrote to him often, but her words were heavy with sadness. "I don't know how to move forward, Bill," she admitted in one letter. "The world sees you differently now, and I don't know how to help." His children wrote too, though their letters were shorter, less frequent. He could feel the distance growing between them, and that hurt more than anything. Back in the world outside, Gaither's legacy was unraveling. His music was still played, but now it was followed by debates about whether it should be celebrated or canceled. His name, once spoken with admiration, was now attached to controversy. Gospel radio stations hesitated to feature his songs, unsure of how their audience would react. Christian bookstores pulled his merchandise from their shelves. His ministry, once thriving, was now struggling to survive under the weight of scandal. But despite everything, there were still those who refused to let his story end this way. A group of loyal supporters launched a campaign called Redemption for Gaither, believing he could still find a way to make things right. They argued that his contributions to gospel music and faith couldn't be erased by one mistake. They begged the public to remember the good he had done, to give him a chance at redemption. Yet, no matter how much support remained, Bill Gaither's life had changed forever. The world he had once known, the adoration, the respect, the influence, was gone. He had lost his ministry, his reputation, and, most painfully, the trust of those he loved most. The question that remained wasn't just whether he could survive his time in prison, but whether he could ever rebuild what had been shattered. For now, Bill Gaither sat alone in his cell, staring at the gray walls, wondering if the world would ever forgive him, or if he even deserved to be forgiven.